Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with Kathleen Pellegrino. We talked about what new employees are looking for when they are entering the workforce. She has a podcast called Leaving the Nest, and she works in a company called Rocs. It's a staffing company. It's a great conversation. Please enjoy our conversation. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com. I want to discuss the MyDay toric contact lens for a minute. When I'm reaching for a daily lens for my patients, I need to know that it will be available in parameters that I want, and it needs to work. This improves my chair time and my patient satisfaction. The MyDay toric features the same optical lens design features as the most prescribed monthly replacement toric lens on the market. MyDay toric now completely mirrors the Biofinity toric's parameter range. To be clear, if you find the parameter in a Biofinity toric, you can find it in a MyDay toric. This toric lens design is multifaceted to ensure optimal visual acuity, lens stability, fit, and comfort. Its uniform horizontal ISO thickness and wide ballast band quickly orient the lens for better performance and simplified fitting. The MyDay material is CooperVision's softest one-day silicone hydrogel lens and features Aquaform technology combining a unique balance of high oxygen permeability and natural wettability. The result is a highly breathable lens that keeps our patients' eyes looking clear, white, and healthy. So if you haven't started utilizing MyDay toric in your practice, I'd encourage you to reach out to your CooperVision representative to get started. Kathleen, the thing that I thought was interesting when your dad and I was talking was you had started a podcast, and he was sort of talking about podcasting, and he heard that I had done a podcast. And then he was telling me about what you were doing, and I thought it would be interesting to have a conversation related to the types of things that you see with kind of people in your generation. As you said, you and I met so probably 20 years ago. I think I had to be like I don't think I was still in high school, but I think I was probably 19 years old. So that would have been like 22 years ago. So you would have been what? Okay. How old?
Yeah, I do remember that because I was just like I was probably, 12, 7, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. So so you and I are in different generations somewhat, but also it doesn't feel like that in a lot of cases. Like Natalie, my sister, she is much more close to your age. And there's a lot of things that she and I are different on, that she's a lot better than I am at things. And so here's the conundrum that I see from my profession standpoint in optometry. A lot of independent practice owners are, they're looking to sell their practices. And so they're, let's say they're in their 60s, maybe late 50s, early 60s. And now you're talking not just like a 20-year gap, but a 40-year gap. And so when you think about like your podcast, Leaving the Nest, the types of things that you think about when you have a young professional coming out into the workforce. What do you guys want? What do you want from your work and from your life? Is there sort of a catch-all thing that you guys are looking for?
You would think. I wish it was that easy, because it almost seems like every single candidate we work with wants their own individual thing. But I mean, overall, I was just reviewing, we have a blog on our website at rocsjobs.com, and one of the blog posts was just all about, how to retain and attract kind of that entry-level talent. And I mean, it's almost like you have to adjust per the generation. So a lot of companies, they'll try to highlight their benefits, but instead of talking to a recent college grad about like your 401k plan that they probably don't know anything about or haven't even thought about, you might want to highlight things like your culture and the flexibility that's offered and any kind of diversity initiatives that you have in place. It's definitely more about just like the feeling that somebody gets at work rather than like their actual job responsibilities, or, money definitely obviously drives a lot of factors for everybody, and the salaries have gone up quite a bit in the last couple of years. But I think what I've been noticing is positions that have a little bit more flexibility or offer more room for growth or whatever it is, where it's easier to fill those rather than the ones that are just going to throw money at somebody. They're looking at more of I would say like a long-term fit. I know people in our generation tend to hop around quite a bit versus the older generation, but even still, they kind of want to know like, what's the next step? What am I working towards? So that's what really gets them excited and gets them to stay within the company once they're hired.
So one of the things that I'm hearing from you is obviously there's sort of this work-life balance that becomes really important. And one of the things that can be challenging from my perspective, even at 41, and certainly guys that were before me and gals that were before me that worked really hard to build their practices and to build their businesses. Some of this, I think what you're talking about really relates to kind of the team members, sort of the staff that we might have in our practice. But I do think it relates to hiring young doctors as well. And what that tells me is if we're looking for work-life balance in this new generation, that my takeaway, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but my takeaway has been that the work is secondary to providing a lifestyle that you want. I would say that in my generation, or maybe my mentality as a practice owner, my goal has always been said, look, I want to focus on taking care of patients, running a good business. And if I do that well, then it will allow me to take care of my family. But one of the things I have seen, and again, I may be completely wrong, is that that's not the primary thing. It's almost like the work is a secondary thing so I can do this other stuff. And I'm not saying that's a wrong perspective. It's just totally different than the way I've looked at things. And I think the way a lot of my peers have looked at things. And that's where we miss, that's where we miss communications.
And I would say, I feel like this was a huge shift with the pandemic and with COVID, because before that, I felt like the expectations were still really high to be in the office full time, Monday through Friday, 9 to, whatever it is and all that. And then once everyone kind of started to learn like, okay, we can do this and there can be a little bit of flexibility, or there are more things to life than just your job or whatever. I think that really hit home to a lot of recent college grads or kind of the younger. And now, as we've kind of moved further and further away from COVID in 2020, I am noticing companies still, going back full time in the office, and that's, it's working out fine, but I know the offices that we're recruiting for that are still offering the flexibility on a hybrid or work from home or whatever, just something where, like you said, has that work-life balance, and people are jumping at those, a lot quicker. Or, we're recruiting for a solid position right now. It's an administrative role, but it's 100%
you said solid.
in the office.
You said solid position. That's the terminology. Solid, like you're physically there.
Well, yeah, but just it's good company, good benefits.
Okay.
And just overall kind of checks every box is sort of what I meant. But no, that's not what they're referring to. With that, we just call it like an on-site position. But I had a girl today who was totally qualified for it. I thought she'd be a great fit, but she ultimately said it wasn't going to work for her because she'd rather take a significant pay cut for this other role that we're recruiting for, only because that one is 100% remote. So, You're absolutely right with how they weigh their priorities, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting from my perspective too, because what I'm hearing you say is that there's more value placed on a physical, an employee that's going to physically be in the office, potentially, as opposed to somebody who's going to be completely remote. Is that the case? Is that pretty customary?
That's a good question. I would say in this particular instance, it's just a totally different role as far as like qualifications and what's necessary. So that's why the other one pays significantly less rather than it being remote. I actually haven't seen too much of a differential between, on-site and remote as far as like the pay scale goes. But yeah, it's interesting out there, and it's kind of just this ever-changing and moving target is what we've kind of discovered.
Do you, so your company works for, so like do other companies hire your company to help them identify employees, or you are matching the employee to those other companies?
Yeah, that actually brings up something I wanted to talk to you about too. So just a little bit of background. I work for a small staffing company called Rocs. It stands for Responsible Outgoing College Students. And our whole world is just filling entry and junior level jobs for companies kind of all throughout our area, but even just throughout up and down the East Coast. So it could be really any type of a company that will say, hey, Rox, we have a position for an administrative assistant. Could you help us get this filled? And then through our interview process, we're identifying kind of the top contenders for that. The only difference is some of the roles that we're filling can be remote. And I feel like in your world, interacting with patients, I feel like you kind of have to be in the office. So it might be just like two totally different worlds that we're in, but it all still kind of relates to one another.
Well, I think it relates mainly because there's this shift in healthcare where we're trying to figure out what can be done remotely, where patients. So you brought up COVID, and I totally agree. I mean, I've probably told this story on the podcast before a number of times, but I'll share it with you. During the peak of COVID, so really the beginning of April of 2020 to the beginning of May in Nebraska, we had kind of vague regulations. So my position on it was I'm going to be there for patients that need to be seen. If they want to come in, they know the situation, they think it's urgent enough or emergent enough that's going to satisfy that sort of urgencies or emergencies, suspend, what they called routine care, and only provide urgencies and emergencies. And so what we did was we shortened our hours from 8:00 in the morning to 2:00 in the afternoon. I saw patients 3 days a week. My dad saw patients 2 days a week. And then I was on call 24 hours a day. And if you looked at a lot of the regulation, a lot of what occurred was that we were able to now, there was this flexibility within telehealth where Medicare had really tight restrictions on telehealth services. So there was not really an incentive. And then it's not like doctors have to have incentive, but they were providing, if you had a telehealth consult, it was basically completely cash pay or free. And most of us would just have, unfortunately just done it for free because it was a service to our patients. And so there was also this really quick change where Medicare and other payers were responsive to say, look, we're going to reimburse you for these services because they are value, even though they are remote. And so that really opened up a whole other kind of on-call emergency where before, if you were to just take call, I had two options. I had the option to have a phone call with a patient and say, yeah, we can do this and triage you with a phone, and then we'll see you on Monday. Or the other one is, nope, I really need to see you, and now I'm breaking apart my weekend. And so COVID, after COVID, I was like, well, now there's this intermediate step where I could actually physically see patients through a screen like this and sort of get a sense of how bad it is. And I could even get good images in a lot of cases to see what I wanted to see. And so it was a good intermediate step. I tell you all of that to say that I completely understand what happened during COVID for people in the workforce. Like, we designed our practice now post-COVID based on what we went through with COVID. So I didn't want to go back 4 days a week. I wanted to stay seeing patients 3 days a week. we decided that our team, they wanted to be home at nighttime with their families. So we stopped seeing patients. Our last patient is at 3:45 and we're walking out of there no later than 4:45. And most days we're out of there by 4:30. And so Monday through Friday. So we did change the way that we saw patients. The other thing I have seen is now, you have inflation. So people are costing more. But most payers, most managed care payers, medical and vision managed care payers are not giving raises to doctors commensurate with those not just not commensurate. They're just not giving them in this stage of inflation. So as a provider, what we are looking at is what tasks do we do physically in the office that don't have to be done physically in the office. So there is this, I do think that what you're going through, our business is maybe a little bit late to that game, but we're really starting to think about how can we hire people to work remotely to be accommodating to their schedules, but also maybe really more cost effective because we can outsource a lot of that to give people that want to have those things remote. They get them remote, but it's just, they don't have the physical demands of patient care. So they don't get paid as much, which helps us fight inflation.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's been working for employers who have started to kind of implement those changes. And like I said, I haven't really seen too much of a difference. With the clients that we're working with, I haven't seen them say things like, we'll offer more to somebody who comes in or offer less because it's a remote position yet. But I'm sure, we're headed in that direction. Absolutely. And, one thing I would say with entry-level hires specifically, just a heads up, I would say it's important for them to be in the office regularly at the beginning, when they're just starting off and they're training, they need to learn the culture and the systems and whatever. And then, it doesn't have to start off, remotely. I think onboarding somebody completely remote can be challenging, but once they, really, learn the name of the game or whatever it is, then they feel confident to be able to move on and work remotely. And I think now we've all learned that it's important to just be able to adjust, and COVID came very quickly. I know for here at Rocs, we were always 100% in the office. And then it was, Friday, we were told starting Monday, we're working remotely. So just knowing how to adjust to that, I think we all learned a very big lesson back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it did teach a lot of lessons. Do you think people are I know this probably isn't what we had really originally thought we would discuss, but it comes to mind. Do you think people are as productive remotely in what you see?
I think so, for sure. I mean, you definitely have to keep some of them on a tighter leash than others. But even speaking to my own experience, like I said, I said it a couple of times, but we used to be 100% in the office, and I was so used to that lifestyle. Then once 2020 came, started working remotely, and now our team does a hybrid work environment. And I haven't noticed any decrease in productivity or anything. I actually think when I come into the office, such as today, the team can be almost a little distracting because I'm working with, 20 other people that are my friends, and we're chatting and we have things going on. And this morning I came in early and I couldn't get anything done. I was just chit-chatting with the girl next to me all day. But when I'm at home, I'm just very I'm working now. And it definitely depends on the person, for sure. Some people have more of a strict work ethic than others. I'm personally not one to have the TV on in the background or trying to do 100 different chores at the same time as work. But there are people absolutely who take advantage or who just need to be watched a little bit, who kind of ruin it for the rest of us. But yeah, it's not a perfect system. Everyone's a bit different, but I don't think it's a huge automatic thing. They're working remotely, they're probably not going to do as well. But everyone has their own opinions. If you called my dad back, he would totally disagree with me. So
I didn't get a chance to talk too much to your dad about some of those things specifically, but he's got to be old school, I would guess,
100%
right?
Old school. Yeah, we go back and forth on this all the time. And I remember when he started to go back, first of all, the man needs to retire. I don't know what he's doing. He's been working too hard.
Wait, so that's really interesting because, but that's interesting too, because I think it could be that, it could be that he just likes to do it. Don't you think? When I talk to him about it, I think he likes to do it. And I think it gives him a purpose, right? That is kind of a purpose.
It is.
But you think he needs to retire? He likes to buy Jaguars.
He could take it down a notch, I guess. But I'm glad he's keeping busy and he's having fun with it for sure. He definitely, it's his passion. absolutely. But he is old school. And I remember he went back to work in the office. And it wasn't even like a few days later, like one person got sick and then they passed it to this person and he was homesick. And I was like, Dad, if you were all working remote, you'd be working hard right now and not sick in bed. And he made some kind of comment back to me, but it was funny.
Do you think you're ever going to think like him?
I think him and I are actually really similar. Yeah, so I think that. And actually, I've been with Rocs for almost 10 years now. And wow. It's been hard. It's been an adjustment for me to see all these changes because, there's a part of me that's like, when I was a recruiter and I was just starting off, we were in the office and we never did lunch breaks or whatever. And now we're a lot more flexible, but everyone's a lot happier now. So I do struggle sometimes with my younger coworkers who are coming in and they don't know how easy they have it compared to how it used to be. But so I'm basically my dad.
Like him, Kathleen. Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Thank you for making me realize that.
You're welcome. I have a group of running buddies I've mentioned on this podcast numerous times. And sometimes we get out there and I think, holy cow, I feel like I sound like my grandpa, and it's true. Things change and I'm just trying to figure out, I'm always like to try to think, what are those changes that are going to occur and how do I not be just totally closed off to them, and that's why I think this conversation is so helpful because I'm thinking, all right, well, I'm trying to meet my team members at the place they're at. And part of that is a totally different place, like you're describing, than it was 10 or 15 years ago when I got out of school. So what's the most interesting or challenging position that you've had to fill within Rocs? And I've got another question related to the podcast.
Yeah, so I guess our internal team, we kind of start everybody off as recruiters so they can learn how to interview and fill positions. And then we try to transition them into more of like a business development sales position. And that seems to be, fine. And we don't have any issues there. I would say with our clients, the toughest positions to fill right now are accounting roles. For some reason have just been few and far between. I don't know what's going on with accounting, but we used to be able to fill like staff accountants, AR, AP, whatever. We still are, but it's just way more challenging to find the right talent with the right background. I think there's been a big shift in accounting, just systems and all the automation and all that. So I don't know if that's helping us too much, but that's been challenging. Sales positions are always, unique. Finding somebody who's okay with that kind of like drive and the quota and the commission and all that. But overall, every position has been challenging in its own way. Even just like, your front desk receptionist, administrative assistant, customer service. Whatever it is, each one has its own little like caveat, as you would say. But we've been able to kind of weather the storm a little bit since it's all we do is just recruit and we're like a machine, just kind of cranking through interviews. It doesn't hurt us, but with the companies we're working for are usually like small to medium-sized companies who don't have like the time or resources to go through all these interviews and post up jobs or whatever. I can't imagine how they're getting jobs filled when they're not, working with some other additional resources.
What are kind of the best types of questions to ask during an interview of a candidate?
Yeah, there's the typical ones, right? You tell me about yourself. Tell me what would your supervisor say about you. But I think the ones that I've always enjoyed asking are just kind of digging deeper into kind of their passions, what we were talking about earlier. One of the questions that I love asking is, what are the top 3 things you're really looking for in your next job? Because you can quickly tell where their priorities are at. If they say, I want to jump in salary, or I want a close commute, or I don't want a manager who micromanages me. You can kind of just see like what's really going to help them feel comfortable and create the environment that they would thrive in. So just kind of almost, you don't want to give a new hire everything they shouldn't be entitled to everything, but just kind of knowing what would keep them engaged and happy and I guess like satisfied in their job is helpful to know, more so than like, what are your weaknesses? So
yeah. Well, yeah, because everybody is going to respond by like, my weakness is working too hard. You know what I mean? Like
right,
they're going to turn something that's
perfect.
Like,
yeah.
I'm just too perfect. Yeah. As you know, patients with vitreous floaters are often frustrated by their symptoms. The challenge as clinicians is to offer solutions for our patients for vitreous floaters that are effective. But more often than not, the options of YAG vitreolysis and vitrectomy are not practical because the benefits don't outweigh the risks. That's where Vitreous Health from MacuHealth comes into play. Previously on the podcast, I've discussed the FLIES study with Dr. John Nolan, and the bottom line is that I can be confident prescribing this for my patients with floaters because I can tell them a large randomized placebo-controlled trial found that after 6 months of supplementation with Vitreous Health, floaters were reduced in size by approximately 30%, and 70% of patients had an improvement in their symptoms. Vitreous Health has been great for my patients, and we really feel like we have a viable option to treat patients with vitreous floaters now that we didn't have before. If you're not utilizing Vitreous Health for your patients, reach out to your MacuHealth representative now. One of the challenging things with patients is that when they invest in a really high quality pair of glasses and customized lenses, occasionally it can be difficult to keep those lenses clean, scratch-free, and smudge-free. Now, we have the ability with Crizal Sapphire HR lenses to offer our patients a best-in-class anti-reflective coating that is also resistant to scratches, smudges, and deposits. This means that patients spend more time enjoying clear and comfortable vision and less time caring for their lenses. So remember that you can provide patients with the best in quality, best in class, transparency, clarity, durability, and UV protection in a single Crizal coating. If you want to learn more about Crizal Sapphire HR, contact your Essilor account executive or visit essilorpro.com/Crizal. That made me wonder about, in that interview process, is it wise to ask about like where do they see themselves in 6 months, in 6 years? I mean, are there things that can be helpful as a business owner or a hiring entity to get information about the longevity of somebody within the practice, or even knowing, or within the job, or knowing what that person is going to need to be satisfied, or those types of questions, because somebody's life is always in flux, you can't really know, or they can't give you accurate answers to?
I'm glad you said that, because it really is tough to tell. And I always have to tell my clients, I'm not a mind reader. So, the candidates sitting here telling me they love this job, they'll accept right away, they want, to work here forever or whatever. But then if you fast forward a few months, sure, their husband's getting relocated, or they decided to go back to school. It's just like, we never really know. And we never place somebody into a position, knowing they're going to law school next year, or knowing this is just a stepping stone for them. But sometimes it's just truly hard to tell what is going to happen. And like I said, we are not mind readers, and we're working with people, and people are unpredictable. So that can be tough. It doesn't hurt to ask, because sometimes it can be pretty telling, especially if they're applying for one position and then you ask them where do they see themselves in 2 years, and it's something totally different. I mean, it's good to know those things, but sometimes what I'm finding is some employers are overthinking it a little bit much, and we're really big on just giving people the opportunity, hiring them based off their potential rather than, their past, because they're mostly entry level anyway. But yeah, it can be tough. Sometimes you just have to take a chance.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I always want to think about is like, when we hire people, I generally look at them as like, I want them to be with us for a very long time. And so the kind of question, that's probably the wrong question, and I don't usually ask it, but it's going through my mind, is I just want to sort of cut to the chase and be like, look, we want to hire you, but I need to know what you want to be happy, like what's going to make you happy in 6 months and what's going to make you happy in like 3 years. I don't ever ask this, but I always wonder, like, maybe I should just ask that, because like you're saying, well, maybe it just helps them clarify. Maybe they don't even know. Maybe they're not even thinking about it. Like you're saying, it's like, well, maybe they're looking at the income. Maybe they're looking at the benefits. Maybe they're looking at the hours, but I can't really know. So anyway, that's just one of the things that I don't think I've asked. But I always think I want to, but it might not just be the best question. That's all. I mean, I don't know. Because then it's like, what do I have to do to make you happy? Because as an employer, I want you to be here for a while.
Mm-hmm. It is a popular question. I mean, just where do you see yourself in the next couple of years? Or, one thing that a lot of employers do is they'll look at, their job history, just, because I come across so many job hoppers, and I'm going to sound like my dad again, but I'm clearly not. I've been with Rocs since I graduated
It's okay.
college.
He's a nice guy.
He is a nice guy. But it amazes me how often people are jumping from job to job, and they'll do it for just, a few cents more here, a couple dollars more in their hourly pay or whatever. I mean, it doesn't take much. Yeah, it is crazy. And I feel like unfortunately, there's no clear question you could ask to prevent that or whatever. I mean, I think more so because you can only tell so much in an interview, and any candidate is always going to tell you whatever you want to hear in an interview because they want the job. But I think what's more important is once you decide to take a chance on them and you hire them, just kind of checking in with them regularly. I mean, even more than quarterly. We do kind of like monthly check-ins here. That might be a little much, but just every so often, grab them, set them aside, talk to them about, their job satisfaction, how things are going. Or even if you did an anonymous survey, you might get a little bit more intel if it's anonymous. But things like that, I think, are more important than the interview questions because everyone's going to be, their minds are in a million different places and things change so often. I was just talking to a coworker today where like Q1, January, like we were both killing it. And then things have kind of like fallen off and it's been harder to fill jobs. But I know, our job has a lot of ups and downs, but if you had asked us in January, like how's the job going? It's going great. I love it. This is awesome. And now you ask us in like April, May, it's like, well, it's challenging. I'm frustrated here and there. So I think just kind of checking in with your team on a regular basis is going to be way more telling than any sort of interview question.
Then, so your company, you work with all types of businesses all across the country. Is that correct?
Mostly up and down the East Coast, but you're right. All kind of industries, all different sizes. So we work a lot of associations, nonprofits. Those are big for us. Property management has been, but really any kind of industry, which keeps it interesting.
Yeah. And so if somebody were to hire, so let's say there was a doctor listening on the East Coast and they needed to hire a new receptionist, they could contact your company and you would basically go through sort of a pre-interview process and screen candidates. Is that right? Or would you actually select the candidate? Like, I understand your job so well, what you're trying to fill, that we're going to do all that for you.
Absolutely. I would say the answer is both. More times than none, companies will like us to just narrow it down and, we'll screen them. We'll go through the interview process with Rocs. We have kind of like a multi-step screening process on our end before we send them to you. And then we basically just, instead of when you open your inbox and you're looking at 200 applications, you're looking at like 2 or 3 applications of people. We've already interviewed them. We know they're a good fit. We've talked to them about, the practice and what the job entails, and they're excited. And then we can just help out with the coordination too, which is, because it's a headache to go back and forth. Like, I'd like to meet with you. When are you available? I'm available this time, that time. So we take as much off your plate as you want. There are clients that just say, hey, Rocs, I need somebody. Send me your best person to start next week. And we've done that too. And usually that comes with time. We have to build credibility with that new account. But more times than none, it's just we're here to kind of narrow it down for you and help with all the back and forth. But then we want our clients to make the final say. And for somebody to just, employers to know this, I think it's helpful to do an interview. We're kind of away from the times where we could just say, like, this person's hiring, you can start on Monday. They really want to kind of vet them out themselves and make sure it's a good fit for them. So it's almost a red flag to job seekers when, you don't get an interview and you just get somebody started.
What does that tell? We would never do that, but why is that a red flag to job seekers? Like, what do they see when you do that?
Yeah, I think they just, sometimes when you have to find the balance, because when your interview process takes too long, then that's a red flag, because it's just like, why am I going through 3 rounds of interviews? Don't you, can't you hire me now or whatever? But then when you go too fast, they're kind of like, I haven't met anybody. I haven't seen the office. I don't know what anything's like. I don't know if I'm going to like this. So sometimes it just kind of catches them off guard because we used to do that all the time. And now it's like, you have to at least do some sort of touch point, like at least a phone call or something, so that they know it's, and that might be because of all the scammers out there and all the different things. I think that's really picked up in the last couple of years. You really have to kind of prove yourself a little bit, but I think it's more so just like the turnaround time. Like I said, finding the balance between, don't want to take too long, but if you go too fast, they might take someone else a little bit more seriously.
You brought up scammers. Do you mean like people that would take like a remote job or multiple remote jobs? What do you mean by that?
Well, I was just saying because, right now it's so easy to get scammed in every way. I mean, I know a lot of employers are getting scammed on their end with remote workers. I was just talking to a client about that last week, or somebody says they're one person, they're not, or they completed their degree, but they actually didn't. There's a lot of that going on. I guess on the job seeker side, I just think, go show up to this office. They're expecting you at 9 a.m. on Monday. It's just kind of that fear of the unknown. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I don't even think about that stuff, although I should. Okay. So I want to change gears and give you a chance to talk about your podcast. So when did you start the podcast?
So to bring up COVID again, COVID was definitely a downtime in our business. Not as many people were hiring, if at all. So here at Rocs, we were working remotely and just really took the time to evaluate our company and what else we could do to offer and add resources. And I was interviewing a girl for a financial internship opportunity, and she asked me the sweetest question. She just said, "Can I wear open-toed shoes to my interview, or is that bad? Should I wear flats?" And it was just kind of cute that she just didn't know the proper way to dress for an interview, and it just kind of hit me like a light bulb there. Because the joke for me is that I used to not like podcasts. I used to think who would listen to this? Or, it sounds like when you're on the radio and you're just looking for the next song, right? Nobody wants to listen to people talk. And then I got really into podcasts.
Then you got older like your dad.
No, I'm not I'm not totally like my dad. I'm not that old. No,
not
but
yet.
Yeah, I'm getting there, one day at a time.
One day.
Yeah. So I just kind of came up with the idea of just providing another resource for our recent grads to turn to. And it's been a lot of fun. Just, we have a Nest newsletter. So the name kind of goes hand in hand with that. And it's kind of a 2-part podcast where episodes that I put on myself are kind of what we just talked about, how to dress for an interview, how to follow up, how to get a professional headshot done or whatever. And then I really like having the opportunity to speak with business leaders and just having them share their story about how they got, where they are today and how they've been able to be successful and what it was like leaving the nest for them. So it's been a ton of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my story is not dissimilar. Mostly it was just, I did like having long form conversations with people. And I've tried that. What's interesting to me is that I sort of bounce around. I could sit and have really long conversations, but there is a sort of finite number of people that can listen to really long conversations. I like it, but some people just won't when you look at the data. So I've just shortened them, to kind of tighten them up a little bit, but they're still probably longer than most podcasts. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it was fun to do. I started doing it. I actually really had the idea in 2015. This is crazy. It's 2015, but I didn't really execute it until 2019. And it was the very first week of 2019. And so I had a whole year, more than a year before COVID hit. And I'll tell you, it kept me sane during COVID because I was still able to communicate with people that were going through the same thing. And if you go back and listen to those episodes, Kathleen, you will hear the gravity, the weight of what was going on in my voice. It is really crazy. Yeah. And so I still every now and then go back and listen to some of those episodes, not the whole thing, but just to what was I thinking about, and was I off base, and how off base was I? And anyway, it's been fun. It's been fun. So I know you and I have some other conversations offline, but if people want to reach out to your company or want to check out your podcast, let them know where they can go.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm definitely active on LinkedIn, so anybody can find me there. I'm sure you'll be able to link it for me, but I'm on there as Kathleen Pellegrino. I always say my Pellegrino is still my stage name, but I did, my maiden name is still what I use for work and stuff. So it's Kathleen Pellegrino on LinkedIn. And then the podcast, you can find it on all the major platform sites. It's called Leaving the Nest. It has a little bird on the logo there. And then definitely feel free to give us a call here at Rocs. So it's ROCS here in Northern Virginia, but we can recruit all over.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
So I'm excited for today and everything. It's good to see you guys telling. Chris, has been obviously a really long time, but I've heard so much about you guys and your family. I talk to your mom a lot, so.
Yeah.
Has it been 20 years? You haven't seen her since then?
No, I saw her at Teresa's funeral.
Oh, yeah. Good for him, but.
Okay.
All right.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Okay, say bye-bye, May May. I'll go up in the treehouse in a minute.